All right, so the next step is going to be creating our activity main, and we need to put the fields on here and our values. So I'm going to go into the values, and we're going to go into the strings.xml, and we're going to lay out our variables in here. So I'm going to put this on pause while I type them out, and then you can put your video on pause so you can type it out. Okay, so in order of the fields that are going to go onto our page here, or onto our view, we have a string called text title, which will be this label up on the top, convert patient weight. We have ID will be text weight, and that's going to be our number field right here. Weight of patient is the hint. We have two radio buttons, which is why it says RAD, so that's referring to the radio buttons. I have radio, this one would be convert pounds to kilograms, so that's rad LB to kilo. And then the second radio button, rad kilo to pounds, convert kilograms to pounds, is going to be this radio button here. And then we have the button, BTN button convert, which will be this button right here. So these will be the strings we'll be using, and I'll put this on pause and then come back and we'll put that on our activity main. Back in our activity main, I have set up two of the views. We have the text view, which I need to give an ID of text title. And in text title, set the constraints, and I set the text size to 30 scalable pixels. I set the color to red. I centered it. And what else? Layout width, actually, and we did match constraint. Okay. And then I put in a number view, and I use the decimal number view, so that way the user for kilos, can put in something like 270.4 or whatever it might be. So I use the decimal one in this case. Set the constraints, also set the constraints to match constraint. I used the hint was the text weight that we set up earlier. Let's see, actually I'm going to set this to 25 scalable pixels, and I don't know why that one is set to red. That was not my intention, but that's apparently what I did. So there you go, just for something a little different, and it's centered. All right, so now what we need to do is we need to put in our radio buttons. So I'm going to come into buttons and see that there is a radio group and a radio button. So for the moment, I'm going to put in two radio buttons. And I'll start with this one. I'll call this one radio button pounds to kilograms, and set the constraints as we've done before. And I'll set the constraints, and let's see, this will be the string that we set up earlier, which was pounds to kilos. And let's see, I should be able to match those constraints. So I need to change the margins because those are pretty big. That looks a little bit better. All right, and so I'm going to go ahead and add the next button, same way that I did with this one. And then I'm going to put it on pause, and I'll come back with that radio button done. So just replicate what you've done with this one with the second one. All right, so I've added the second radio button. I've given it an ID, rad radio, rad kilo to pounds. I've set the constraints just like we've done before. And then we set the text to, where am I headed? The text to the string, and rad kilo to pounds, which is we set up in our string XML file earlier as well. So now if you display this in your emulator, it in fact has the two radio buttons, but if I click on one, that seems great. But if I click on the second one, now I've got a problem. It defeats the purpose of our application here, and that is that these should be mutually exclusive, that if I click one, then the other goes off and vice versa, and that's not what's happening. And so that's where the radio group comes into play. And so I'm going to bring the radio group down, and the radio group acts as a container for the radio buttons. So what I'm going to do in the component tree, I'm going to slide both of those radio buttons into my container. So I have them reversed, there we go. And so now my container thing went kind of wonky. So what's going on here? Well, let's see. I'm going to click on, well, first of all, I'm going to click on the radio group container, and I'm going to constrain that. So I'm going to constrain it to the number box above and to the sides. It doesn't need to be that far away, and the sides maybe should be 8 and 8. But things still are looking a little wonky. I'm going to match my constraint here, so it should take up the full width, but it's pretty high. So let me go to these two radio buttons we set up earlier, and instead of layout width, we can see that our constraint match constraint went away. Now I'm going to match them to the parent, and so that brings them a little bit smaller. So things are looking a little bit better there. So now let's see what happened to my group. So my group is more appropriate in size, and things are looking a little bit better. I do want to also bring your attention to, if you scroll down here far enough, I have, let me do this one instead because it's a little bit lower, it'll be a little bit more obvious. So I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to show you something that is our layout. So our layout margin is saying, well, we're children within this container, so this is spacing themselves according to the container. So for example, this one has a margin 32 top. So let me make it 5 SP to the top, just so you, or DP, just so you can see what happens when I hit enter to this radio box. It's going to slide itself up. So in relation to each other inside of their parent container, where should I, top, left, right, and bottom, and that kind of a thing. So that gives you the ability to space them apart a little bit. So it just gives them a little more spacing within their container. So now, if we look at our emulator, we should see that those buttons are now, I'm stalling, hoping that my emulator shows up pretty quickly. Now we should see that those buttons will be mutually exclusive. So if I click on one, the other disappears, and so forth. So now we've got our radio buttons working. In the next video, then we'll add our button and then a text field to show the results of our calculation.